Okay, so welcome. First of all, welcome to leveraging overlay journals to link and cite data, software, and research outputs. Just so you know, you're in the right place. We're hosting this at SciLifeLab and in the data center, and it's one of our sort of first webinars on from the open science team. So hope you get a lot out of it, but we'll be doing more of these in the future as well. I'm Chris Erdman. I'm the head of open science at SciLifeLab. I'm joined by Suné Joubert and Alma Nilsson, and also our speaker Philip Kollinger, and he'll pronounce his name properly when we'll get to it. But as far as just initially, I would like to share with you in the chat as well. Actually, I shared this with the panelist. Doesn't help you, but it's our code of conduct. And I just wanted to first start off and say that this is the code of conduct is there for us to ensure that this is a welcoming space. So we want you to feel welcome and free to share anything with us. Feel free to reach out to us separately as well. But we wish for you to be welcome. So thank you again for joining us. Otherwise, just to briefly start, I'd just say that I'm excited to welcome Philip. Philip and his team at DeSci are doing a lot of great things in this sort of sense of advancing how we're thinking about linking to all these different sort of research outputs, and really sort of advancing how we think about research. And we thought it would be great to invite them and hear more about what they're doing, and also how it might inform how we're doing at SciLifeLab, but in general in the community. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Philip to introduce himself, who will do a far better job, and I will speak after him shortly as well. So Philip, you want to take over?
Thanks so much for the intro, Chris, and hello everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm Philip Köllinger. I'm a professor in economics at the Free University in Amsterdam, and I'm one of the co-founders of DeSci Labs and president of the DeSci Foundation. By the way, DeSci is short for decentralized science, and DeSci Labs is a software company. And the DeSci Foundation is a nonprofit institute that has the sole purpose to advance and support high quality scientific research and science. And today I'll show you how you can easily link and share all your research outputs with a software that we have created that's called DeSci Publish. And that includes manuscripts, data, code, and other resources. And we'll talk a little bit about overlay journals, how they can evaluate these resources before or even after a paper gets published in a traditional journal. So let's start with a little bit of motivation. So why are we talking about data and code sharing? Well, it may seem obvious, but maybe it's worth emphasizing. So following these best open science practices, such as sharing data and code, actually has measurable advantages for the authors who are doing that. So there's several studies actually showing that articles that come with data linked to it get cited a lot more. In some fields, such as economics, studies show that papers with data actually get cited twice as often. And obviously, these practices of sharing these resources, they're often a prerequisite for enabling the reproducibility of the results that are reported in a paper. And this obviously enhances the trustworthiness of the results, but it also increases the chance that the results can be independently replicated by other researchers, basically using the same method, but in a different sample. And in general, this transparency about how authors come up with their findings is highly appreciated in the scientific community by your colleagues, obviously, but also by journal editors and referees. So this is definitely highly recommendable. But we do have a problem here because, as you all know, journals only publish articles. They only publish PDFs. They only have an infrastructure for doing that. They're not having an infrastructure to publish data, code, or any other artifacts. Of course, there's other solutions available for that. So, for example, think of Zenodo and Dryad and Fixture for data sharing, or GitHub to deposit your code repositories. And many people are using these solutions, and that's great. But it's imperfect because every time that you go to a different platform to actually share these resources, you have to create the metadata from scratch. The metadata are not automatically linked with each other. And that means that in a lot of cases, for most published research, actually, these resources are missing. And then even if they are available, the metadata are not integrated or complete enough so that it would be obvious that this data set actually belongs to this paper. And this creates a problem for the funders and the universities that actually want to encourage and in some cases even require these data and code sharing practices, because with incomplete or disintegrated metadata, they can't really see who has done what, who has actually followed their policies, and they also have a really hard time measuring the impact of these shared resources. And that in turn means that the researchers who have been doing the good thing and who went the extra mile to actually share all these resources, that they get relatively limited or no extra credit on top of the paper for having done that. And that, of course, slows down the adoption and uptake of these best research practices. And these are all among the reasons why we developed DeSci Publish. So DeSci Publish is a freely available web application. So you can just find it on the internet and use it. And it's basically a preprint network for all different types of research outputs, so manuscripts, data, code, whatever it may be. And DeSci Publish also facilitates the so-called publish, review, curate model of scientific publishing, the PRC model that we'll talk about in a second. So one of the things that you can do with DeSci Publish, which is quite unique, is that you can create and share versionable research objects. So they can contain any of these resources that describe the work that you've been doing. You can claim badges and get them reviewed. We will, next year, probably, we will also launch a reward and incentive system for referees that actually gives your colleagues a reason to engage in peer review activities and to also do it quickly and objectively and rigorously. And everything that we're doing is open source software that can be basically deployed on on your own hardware, on servers that do not belong to us. They can also be the software can be forked. So we specifically made efforts to make sure that the technology that we're creating and that we're making available is public infrastructure that is independent of its creators. There's obviously no paywalls or publication charges, just like you would expect for a preprint network. And importantly, there's also no data silos. So I'll talk in a second about how we're doing that and what the advantages of that are. Also very important, of course, is that the copyrights of the work, the resources that you're sharing, they always remain under control of the authors. We're never taking away copyrights from the authors. The authors determine what license they share their work under, and that also implies that they will always have the freedom and the possibility to publish their article with traditional publishers. And DeSci Publish is integrated with scholarly databases such as OrgID, Crossref, and OpenAlex. And that way, we're making sure that the work that you're sharing and doing on DeSci Publish also gets the authors and also the referees full credit for the work that they've been doing. Now, let's talk a little bit about this publish, review, curate approach. So we're actually not the first ones or the only ones who are doing that. This topic or this theme has been around for a while. There is several publishers who are already implementing it, including eLife and F1000. And in general, it's often seen as an innovative approach to scientific publishing that is sort of like turning the current model around. So in the current model, the publication happens, as you know, at the end of a very time-consuming, very lengthy, burdensome, intransparent process. So there's a long delay between the work that you've done and actually sharing it with the public. The PRC model turns this around. So here, you're basically sharing your work very early on. And at any point in time when the authors feel ready, they can, for example, claim a badge that characterizes a specific attribute of their research, such as having an analysis plan or having open data, open code. These badges can then be evaluated and reviewed. So all this review activity actually happens on top of openly available content. And then as a final step, you can submit your work to a community or an overlay journal, and it can get curated into the feeds of these communities or overlay journals on the DeSci Publish application. It can also be curated into reading lists that individual users create, very similar to how you can have a Spotify playlist that you share with your friends. So curation happens then also on top of this openly shared content. And in contrast to the current publishing model, this model actually allows you to really create a transparent track record of how you came up with your results. So you can actually start sharing things like an analysis plan or the data or code for the analysis that you're running a long time before you actually have a paper ready. And then whenever you have a new milestone in a project, you can go in, you can just upload that additional content, or you can update files that you already have, create a new version of your research object, and thereby basically really create this transparent track record that makes it possible for others to see how you went from having the first inspiration, the first idea about this project, to having the final product that got published in the journal. And so you can do all of that on the DeSci Publish platform. You can obviously, at any point in time, you can also submit your article to a journal, and you can even, take a open access article or a preprint version of that after it was published and put it into DeSci Publish and add data and code, and then basically claim badges for that and get recognition for having shared these additional resources. And as I said, so DeSci Publish is integrated with the scholarly infrastructure such as Crossref and OrgID, so it automatically generates credit for the work that you've been doing. And underneath the hood is actually a bunch of really powerful Web3 technology that solves several problems that the current publishing infrastructure has, but more generally, even this is really addressing problems that the current internet has. So most importantly, in DeSci Publish, every version of every file automatically gets a unique persistent identifier that is derived from the content of the file itself using something that's called a cryptographic hash function. So a cryptographic hash function basically converts any content that you give it into a string of fixed length. So it's a one-way mathematical function. What we're using is an algorithm called SHA-256, which originally was actually developed by the National Security Agency in the United States. And So SHA-256 basically can produce up to 10 to the power of 77 different hashes. So that's billions of times more than the number of atoms on planet Earth. So the probability that you would end up with the same hash for two different types of content input are literally zero. So this is really a unique way of addressing content. And then whenever you change even just the slightest thing about your content, be it a comma or a pixel, the hash actually changes completely. So as an example, I could have a statement such as SciLifeLabs cares about open reproducible science, and it gives us this hash that I recorded here on the right. If I change even the slightest thing there, I say, for example, SciLifeLab cares about soccer, it would give me a completely different hash, right? So, and then based on these so these hashes actually, they allow us to solve a fundamental problem that we have in the current internet, which is that it does not have persistent identifiers. So the way that the current internet addresses content is, of course, with the URLs that we're all familiar with. But the URLs, they point to where a file is stored, not what that file is. And the result is that if the file is getting moved in a different folder or a different server, or it's being deleted, the URL doesn't work anymore. The URL breaks. It's called link rot. And a related problem is that even if the website still exists, the content that lives there can actually change dramatically over time. So then you have what is called content drift. So URLs, they suffer from both of these problems, and both of these problems are obviously like really serious if you're trying to create a digital persistent scholarly record that is preserving academic knowledge for the future. So hashing and these unique identifiers are a way to address that. And then in DeSci Publish, you basically create these versionable research objects that create data structures that can be represented as directed acyclical graphs, or DAGs, that basically link all the shared files together. And that the root node of that file or file container is a metadata manifest that contains all the information about the research object, such as authors, title, keywords. And then basically all the files in the container automatically inherit the same metadata, and it's obvious that they belong to each other. So the authors, they can customize the metadata of every file, but they don't have to. And we actually have an AI tool that automatically extracts metadata from the manuscript, so you don't even have to worry about it. You just have to check that this is correct. And so this saves a lot of work. It also makes sure that it's just, like I said, that it's really obvious that this data set or this code file actually belongs to this paper and it has been generated by this set of authors. And then the root node of the research object also has a unique identifier that gets indexed on a blockchain, and that creates an immutable track record about who published what when. So that really creates provenance. And we call this system of identifying and linking content that way. We call it decentralized persistent identifiers, or DPIDs. And so DPIDs have a number of really nice advantages. So first of all, it allows you to automatically create persistent identifiers for any content at zero cost. So it's extremely scalable, and it's zero cost because it's just using a mathematical function that is just open source software. And that's in stark contrast to DOIs, where whenever a publisher mints a DOI, they're paying anything between 25 cents and $1. So if you have a lot of content that needs persistent identifiers, if you have a lot of files that need persistent identifiers, these cost factors, they quickly start to matter. The second thing is that DPIDs, by construction, they always resolve to the correct content. So it's a deterministic resolution. And that's, again, in stark contrast to DOIs, where empirical studies have shown that about 50% of them do not correctly resolve to their target resource. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. DPIDs also make it extremely easy to version content. And with versioning, what we mean is not overwriting the old content and just having a new file at the same address. No, versioning really means that you create a new version, just like in a GitHub repository. You're sort of like forking, you're creating a fork. Creating a new version, and then you can basically, as a reader or author, you can scroll through the version history, and you can basically, you have a persistent identifier for every version of every file. So nothing gets lost, everything can be found and identified and retrieved. And then finally, the DPIDs, they can have synonyms, which make them more human-friendly and which allow us to link DPIDs to the existing scholarly record. So for example, when we're minting a DOI for a research object, that DOI actually points to a DPID. Similarly, we have our own logic of URLs that we're generating that make the content accessible through the internet. For example, this notes.dci.com DPID 149, that actually is it looks very different to the DOI posted above, but both of these URLs, they point to exactly the same research object. And I could even have, I could set up my own website that is called, Income Geos or whatever my research project is, and have that website point to the research object, right? So that's hypothetical. That's a hypothetical example here, but it's totally possible. So all of that actually enables us to have content stored on a distributed peer-to-peer network called IPFS. So IPFS is also, it's an open source software project. It's been around for a pretty long time, has a lot of adoption around the globe. So basically, whenever you're publishing something on DeSci Publish, it ultimately gets broadcasted and stored on this peer-to-peer network. And in this peer-to-peer network, the same file can actually be stored by different parties using exactly the same content identifier. Because like in this system, the identifier tells you what that file is, not where that file is stored. So you can have the same copy of the same content by many different storage providers. And when somebody comes in and requests content using this persistent identifier, it gets served from one of the storage providers in the network that has it, typically the one that is closest or fastest. But it really allows creating this redundancy where you can have multiple copies of important content. And of course, many copies keep things safe. So this really helps to contribute to the long-term availability of scientific content. Especially important, I think, when you think about the current environment where funding is being cut and where entire entities, research entities, may be closed down, and then the question is, so what happens to their content? So in this system here, you can actually create backups, you can create redundancy. And also in this distributed peer-to-peer network, it is actually much, much more difficult to actually have censorship, right? So this also contributes to academic freedom by promoting censorship resilience. And here's just an example of what a open data badge that has been validated looks like on the ORG-ID profile of the authors. So this was basically for a research object where the authors claimed an open data badge that was reviewed and validated, and then it automatically generated a publication entry in the ORG-ID records of all the authors automatically. So that's just a way how you can get credit for the work that we've been doing. Okay, and then I can actually switch over and show you how this looks like in practice. So here, this is an example of how a research object looks like when you're a reader. So like it looks quite similar to a normal preprint server. So you have the authors, you have the title, you have the abstract, you have the paper, you can easily download the PDF, you see the DOI. Then in addition, you see the badges that this research object has and that has been validated. And then you can also click on these tabs there. So under research files, you can then find data and code and all the versions of the all their different versions, there's a tab with specific AI analytics. And at the very top, you see this little blue thing that you can click with the V. So that's actually the version control. So this thing that I'm showing here as an example, this is version 19 of this research object, and you can just click on it and go down and then go basically scroll back in history. And now what I want to show you is how to create a research object and how to submit it to a community. So let me see. Chris, can you just quickly verify that
Yeah,
my web is showing?
Yeah, we see a screen. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, so this is basically the homepage. So this is publish.dci.com. So I'm not on the live version now. I'm using a demo version because I basically have the same research object that I can very easily and quickly create. So let's just go through this. But in general, so you can actually access the entire scientific literature here through the search bar. So including the research that was published on DeSci Publish, but also like over 250 million research articles through OpenAlex. And then you can create research by just saying, okay, create research object. And then as a very first thing, it asks you whether you already have a manuscript or not. So if you have a manuscript, that actually is advantageous because, okay, so now I just need to find the one that I want to share with you very quickly. Yeah, so if you already have a manuscript, it's advantageous to start with that because, as you will see in a second, the system actually automatically extracts the metadata from the manuscript. So we're uploading this now. And now it takes a second, and then it has extracted the title and the abstract. We can basically request the DOI for this research object. We press continue on the second screen. We can then add additional files, such as data or code or whatever else we have. So for example, we can link it to a GitHub repository. We can link it to a Google Drive. We can just enter a URL, or, which is what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to upload a data set that belongs to that paper from my hard drive. So that's done. So then the next screen shows you the co-authors. So all the authors have been automatically extracted from the paper. And we already identified that 2 of the 5 authors have an OrgID profile, and it's automatically linked. And then we can, for each author, we can enter the email address, and importantly, also we can specify the role that this author played in the paper. So this is an implementation of the credit taxonomy. So you can, for each author, you can specify what their role was, and it can be several roles. I'm going to skip this step now. As a next step, you can then claim attributes, or you can claim badges and attributes for your research. So here I uploaded open data, so I can claim the open data badge. I uploaded the scientific manuscript, so I can claim that as well. And then on the next screen, I see a preview of my research object. So I can quickly check if everything is okay. So again, I can go in here and I can either edit the author list or I can remove authors and so on and so forth. I can also see if my badges are okay. I can still revoke that. And then the AI algorithm has automatically extracted topics and keywords from the paper, and I can check if those are okay. So most of them actually are okay here, but this is not a pure mathematics paper, so I can delete that. And then I double checked everything, and now I'm ready to publish. I can specify the license for my manuscript data and for my code. And then I can publish with my OrgID, which has the advantage that this work will then be automatically linked to my OrgID record, and I can receive credit for my work there. So I'm logging in with my OrgID right now. And now I just confirm by pressing publish. And now it's going to take a few seconds. And right now, what happens is that in the background, the system is generating these content-derived persistent identifiers for every file that I've uploaded. And then it broadcasts this research object, which is this linked version of all the files. It broadcasts this to this peer-to-peer network. And voila, we're done. So I now have a link that I can share with my colleagues. I can also post this on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Let's see. Okay. And I'm just going to continue now. Oops. What happened? Okay. Yep. Just been there. I don't know. I just had a little blackout on my monitor here for a second. I don't know what happened. Yeah, in any case, so the publication is now finalized, and now I'm in the editing view. So this has now been published. And in the editing view, I now see, aha, the system identified the paper has actually been published previously in a journal. And actually, yes, this is correct. So I can click on action, I can view this publication, or I can just verify, tell the system, yes, this is correct, this is the same paper. So that's the case. Also, I have some unique analytics here. So there's novelty scores where I can decide if I'm going to make them public or if I'm going to keep them to myself. I can also look at closely matching articles that the system have found that were published in the last 5 years in journals. And obviously, the people that are authors of these related research articles, they would be pretty obvious potential referees for my work. I can then also upload additional files. So I can view these files, right? So I can interact with them, I can download them, I can copy the unique identifier of that file and just use it in my code. I can easily add new files and then, basically publish changes, create a new version that way. I can add the co-authors, claim badges. So also in a later version of the research object, I can add additional people. That's no problem. And I can also individually add the metadata of each of the files that I've shared. So I'm not going to do any of that right now, but I want to show you quickly. You can actually create a so-called submission package. And when you do that, it just adds a cover page to your article that contains the link to this research object and that shows the badges that you got. And when you submit this submission package to a journal, the very first thing that the editors and the referees will see is that you're not just submitting an article, you're actually submitting also data and code, and they can immediately go in and check these resources and engage with them. And that actually tends to help with the credibility and the publication chances that you have. And you can easily download it and share that. And then final thing I wanted to show you is, so then there's here the research communities and the overlay journals. So you can just go to one of them. So let's say I'm going to go to the longevist. Oh, that one is not, there's nothing on here in the demo version. Okay, I can go to DeSci Foundation, and then I can just say submit my research, and it shows me all the research objects that I have created in the past, and then I just select one that I want to submit. I say submit, and that was it. So that's how easy it is. And then as a very last thing, I'm going to go back to my slides and show you how you can reach out to me and to Chris if you have any questions. And with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Philip. I'll let you keep that up for a second, but I'll just follow you just briefly with some additional information. I think just some context of, I think, why, this is potentially a sort of an exciting way to work. So let me share my screen if you wanted to stop sharing now. And okay. So go into slideshow mode here real quick. Okay, sorry for the delay. All right, so as that's loading, I just wanted to say, so two things I think are potentially, I think, interesting with the what we see, what we heard from Philip is one, you heard about sort of the challenges and publication process of sort of linking to all these different outputs. And just to give a little bit, again, a little bit more background, persistent identifiers. Why we care so much about them is that this are, they tend to be a core component of FAIR, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And sort of the core, part of this is that these identifiers carry with them with metadata, and Philip actually mentioned that. So you can see some of the core standard identifiers that we have out here, and Philip mentioned some of them. But what's really interesting is Philip links, or the DeSci system and decentralized persistent identifiers have the ability to link out to these identifiers as well. It seems like a robust system. So you could actually slot in decentralized persistent identifiers in here as and in some cases, like it seems like there's a robust way to sort of link out to all these different identifiers and create sort of this richer graph, right? Which is in some ways sometimes challenging in the publication process because you have a lot of software links and data links that are just lost within the publication process. And it's just this like a nice visual that shows all the sort of interlinking that goes on of all these other identifiers. And again, you could sort of slot in how decentralized persistent identifiers can link to all these different identifiers as well, and in sort of this robust way of doing things. One of the things I just wanted to highlight is as part of a Force 11 group, I and others we looked at this challenge of like how does software, how does data, sort of make it through the publication process so it gets counted, so it gets indexed and it's findable in this research graph. And challenge is most of it is not indexed. It doesn't make it through, and you have to sort of build up this sort of best practices and requirements of how publishers can include citation, data citations and software citations. But the reality is a lot of this stuff sort of doesn't make it through because of how things are indexed. And I can probably, if anyone has a question about that, I can speak to that a little bit more. But the reality is, what makes it into a place like DataCite Commons where data gets counted, or software, is it's a very small fraction at the end of the day. And so the citation aspect is one thing we're struggling with as a community. And so, one thing that makes me excited about what Philip presented is that in many ways, taking this preprint and overlay approach is that you can actually link out to and attach other, some of these other objects in a more fluid process that's not like, so linear like you see in a publication process. You can actually add things later or beforehand, like the badging scheme was very interesting in the sense that, you sort of require these things up front with the publication process with the data and software badges. But the other side of it is you can add them later in sort of a curated community. What Philip presented too reminded me of a sort of forward-thinking concept um, that comes out of Montreal, the NeuroLibre project, and they had a very similar approach, which is, we're basing this on the preprints. We link out to the data archive, to all these sort of other computational components like software. You can see this sort of container link. So what's very much behind this is a sort of creating this, what Philip said, replicable piece of research, but in, sort of computational reproducibility. You can sort of package all these things up in a container. And this is exactly what Philip was mentioning, is that you sort of can move past more of the static papers and to something that is more computational, that we can sort of, build on build on as a community and share resources more. So, in many ways, I think they're sort of advancing this NeuroLibre concept further. And you heard some other things too, like which are interesting, which is the community aspect, right? So you can actually, again, in an overlay way, in a community, sort of curate and attach all these sort of different outputs, right? And create much more rich experience. And I use the example of something, this is going on many years, but it's a project I worked on called Zenodo, where we developed this community concept where people could add all their sort of publications and other things like that in a sort of more open fashion. But then you can see that Phil, the DeSci approach and the decentralized persistent identifier approach is really kind of advancing that further. And then the last part of it is, again, creating that richer research graph with all these different outputs and sharing it in a place like Europe PMC, right? And making that more of a rich resource where in many ways the future is, you'll want to filter the research by, like data and software. And as a researcher, it'll be increasingly, it'll be sort of out there in a way that if you're not sharing these things, then that's what people are filtering based on, like, so that in many ways you want your research to be more findable in this sense and more complete. So that's one of the other things that we're sort of working towards as well. And the other aspect too, which we want to sort of give a better perspective of how SciLifeLab, but this is generally the community, the open science community, is that we want to sort of, give this look into how much data is being shared, how much software. And so you see countries like France with the Open Science Monitoring Initiative and with UNESCO really driving this future where it'll be richer with all the different sort of indicators, all these different outputs that are being shared. And we, at least for our part at SciLifeLab, we want to be a part of that to sort of demonstrate that richer, research graph and just that richer future. These are just, a question I had at the end, but how can that DeSci approach help with connecting PIDs? And I think I sort of, mentioned that just with the sort of publication aspect with preprints, and Philip mentioned some of the benefits too of like sort of reviewing and making that sort of more open and transparent. Outputs, linking those together, making citation more effective than it is right now. And then curation, discovery aspects, and reporting. And then, really just creating sort of this objects that are more reproducible. So, this is just some of the things that I think I'm excited about when I hear about what DeSci is doing. And, what sort of they're doing as far as advancing decentralized persistent identifiers. So I'll stop there. I know we have maybe we have a question, but as we wait for that, maybe we can take that question first. And if you have additional questions, please ask them in the chat.
So we did have a question that we discussed a little bit earlier, which was regarding the fact that DPIDs or DP I've been calling them DPIDs, but DPIDs are fairly new. And so just regarding, are they a recognized standard? Are you able to talk a bit more to that, Philip?
Yeah, sure. So you're right. So they're relatively new. So they're basically a combination of different standards that are already established. So for example, the way that these content addresses are being generated, so So that standard actually is like several decades old, and it's been implemented successfully in the way that IPFS operates, which itself is over a decade old now and has millions of adopters. And another really important thing here was for us that we didn't want to create a new standard. It's basically a new technology, but the real purpose is that we want to create interoperability with the systems that already exist. So like we're thinking about this in terms of like backward compatibility. And this is exactly why we have this alias system where we can have DOIs, we can have other types of identifiers, URLs, and they point to these DPIDs and these content addresses in our system. So yeah, that's how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I actually had a question as well about what you demoed as well. I mean, it looks wonderful, and I totally agree with Chris. It's nice that it allows this sort of fluidity of research instead of the traditional sort of paper approach. And it seems what you demoed seems really, really user-friendly. I was just curious though, if a researcher is having trouble with the website, whether is there support that they can access?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we're a small team, but we definitely have technical support. So I don't know if you noticed it, but in the demo on the bottom right, there was this blue thing,
Okay.
and like that's where you click to report a problem when you run into like when something crashes or you don't really know how to move forward. You can report that to our tech team, and they basically every week they prioritize like in which order they're gonna go through these bug reports, and like if there is something really severe for a user, they also get back to you. But in most cases, like if it's an actual bug, we are extremely happy if people tell us that something is not working, so then we have a chance to actually to fix it. Yeah,
That's awesome. Thank you.
There's we don't have any questions so far, but I don't know how much you can speak to this, but you mentioned it briefly about how we are sort of in a moment where data is disappearing, that sort of information is disappearing, and it seems like it's a time that actually makes a stronger case for what you're trying to do. And I'm just wondering how, if you can share, I don't know if like some of it can be shared, but maybe you are having conversations with a number of sort of places about how do we create more sort of a decentralized approach, and so that it's not sort of reliant on some of the things that are happening. Like for instance, the archive preprint server, they're archiving in Germany right now, and because of sort of the dangers, and then like that there's sort of obviously the other cases of sort of data repositories and those kind of things being lost. So I don't know if you're having any conversations, but if you can share, but that seems like a very interesting time. and,
yeah.
and also supporting the whole idea that sharing your data, right? Citing it and is important, the continuity. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so indeed, Chris. So we are having conversations. Also, like we're hearing about conversations that are just happening in the community that people are having at conferences and so on and so forth. And so one thing that I heard, which I found really interesting, was that one of the major U.S. funding institutions, they've been sort of like watching what we're trying to do for a very long time. They've been sort of like lurking in the background, and I heard that they basically said, well, this like all sounds like a really nice theoretical idea, but they really just thought of it as a theory, like an intellectual curiosity, but nothing that would actually take off. And now they have completely changed their point of view on this, and they're like, okay, like this is a really credible solution. It solves a lot of different problems, and we like have 6 months to make the transition. So I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, but the really nice thing of this technology that we built is that you can literally you can sort of like upgrade the content that you have and basically move it over or index it on this peer-to-peer network without giving up control or without like giving this content over to us. So this is exactly what we wanted to intend with this decentralized infrastructure, is that anybody, wherever they are, they can join this robust content address peer-to-peer network. They can mint DPIDs for content that they already have on their servers, index it on IPFS. Others can jump in, create like an archival copy of that. And all of a sudden you start going from data silos that are vulnerable to being shut down, to data loss, to censorship, whatever. You go to a robust approach where basically the community decides what content is actually important, and they can actually collaborate and making sure that this content is preserved for the future.
No, it's I think that like in many ways, yeah, like you have to race, right, to sort of assign all these DPIDs or link them, right, to maybe other identifiers you have. And I guess based on that, I have another question, which is we do have identifiers for certain things like the digital object identifiers, kind of pretty. It's a big deal, right? Like researchers always talk about, getting a DOI for things, and in many ways, it seems like this is robust. Like this is kind of in a way a more robust way of doing things, which is like you could actually type these identifiers, right? Like you can assign a DPID to data or a DPID to a paper, and then it's like a type, right? As far as and that's interesting because there's sort of a lot of work that has to happen to create sometimes these identifiers, right? And so it seems like you're also sort of enabling this community mechanism to sort of do these things more, like I guess more community driven, right? For metadata. And so I don't know if I'm asking my question right, but I'm just wondering like what are you sort of running up against maybe with DOIs or not, and with sort of some of the current infrastructure. And Suné has a question too.
Well, I mean, so with the DOIs, actually, it's really interesting. So so Crossref, obviously, we're a full member of Crossref, just like thousands of other organizations around the globe. But I think they're like a little bit like they're ambivalent towards what we're doing because they see it potentially as a competition. But like I'm always telling them that actually this is highly complementary to what they're doing, and it solves a major problem that they have, which is that currently publishers actually they are responsible for updating the DOI record if they move content, if the URL of a paper changes. The publisher needs to go into the Crossref database and actually tell Crossref what the new URL is. And that's one of the reasons why DOIs actually do not correctly resolve to their target resource all the time, because like, why would they do that? And even if they do it, they often don't do it like really the right way, or they didn't do it immediately. And in our system with DPIDs, if you link a DOI to a DPID, you never have that problem because the DPID is not going to break. So, yeah.
Oh, we had a question. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Wojciech. I didn't see it before, but thanks, Suné. Yeah, if Wojciech, you want to ask your question.
I probably can. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for this great talk. I've been wondering because I mean, as you demonstrated, the manuscript really seems like a natural starting point in the overlay ecosystem. I've been wondering about this in the context of the data that might have been collected much earlier, right? And some information, important contextual information might be lost over the time. So I've been wondering, do you have any thoughts of maybe engaging users earlier in how to use it and know how to start before the manuscript is actually ready?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. You're 100% right about this. So actually, so sort of like the best use case of DeSci Publish is really that we want to facilitate this early and frequent sharing of research progress, often starting like with something like an analysis plan or a registered hypothesis, and then adding code and data later, and so on and so forth. So if you do not have a manuscript yet, you can just start a research object from scratch, and then you basically have to enter the metadata of that research object manually, right? So you enter the authors manually, you give it a title, and then when you update it, you can of course change all of these things. But this is totally possible, and I've actually been using the system that way for several of the papers that I've been working on, and yeah, it actually helped me to literally remember where I left things off and make sure that I'm not forgetting anything, and that things don't get lost. So yes, this is totally possible. Just requires a little bit more manual input if you don't have a manuscript yet.
Well, I think we're almost at time. So, but I think, you know, obviously if there's interest in exploring this further, then please reach out. I think there actually has been the question of like, well, what do we do this at SciLifeLab? And I don't know, you know, like there really has to come from the community, the interests, you know, like I think in many ways we're just thinking about how we, you know, how we approach like new technologies like this. And so it's nice to hear from you, Philip, and see how, you know, how we can think about these things. And yeah, otherwise, you know, thank you for sort of advancing, trying to advance research, you know, like, and move us forward. So appreciate that. So yeah, and thanks everyone for attending, and yeah, and hope you have a nice rest of the day. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Oh, wait, there was a Q&A. Sorry, it was Wojciech. Or sorry. We got it. Thanks. Okay. Have a good one.
Bye.